Jimi Hendrix fell to his knees on stage when he got the most tragic news of his life: the rise of a musical genius. The story of Jimi Hendrix is one of the most compelling narratives in the history of popular music. It is a story that encompasses extraordinary talent, relentless ambition, profound struggle, and ultimately, a tragic end that would leave the world mourning the loss of one of its greatest artists. To understand the full weight of the moment when Jimi fell to his knees on stage, we must first understand the man he had become and the journey that had brought him to that pivotal moment. Jimi Hendrix was born Johnny Allen Hendrix on November 27, 1942, in Seattle, Washington. His early life was marked by instability and loss. His mother, Lucille, was a woman of remarkable spirit, but she struggled with her own demons and personal challenges. When Jimi was just 9 years old, his mother passed away, leaving a void in his heart that would never be completely filled. His father, Al Hendrix, did his best to raise the boy, but the loss of his mother had a profound impact on young Johnny's emotional development and his understanding of the world. Despite these early hardships, Johnny discovered something that would become his salvation and his greatest gift to the world: music. His father gave him his first guitar when he was around 11 years old, and from that moment forward, the instrument became more than just a possession. It became an extension of his soul. He would spend countless hours practicing, teaching himself to play, and gradually developing a unique style that would eventually revolutionize the world of rock music. By the time Jimi Hendrix reached his early 20s, he had already played in various bands and had begun to develop a reputation as an exceptionally talented guitarist. He had served in the United States Army, an experience that was formative in many ways, though it was not always positive. After leaving the military, he continued to pursue his musical career, playing in clubs and small venues, gradually building his skills and his confidence as a performer. The turning point in Jimi's career came in the mid-1960s when he moved to England. It was in London that he truly began to flourish as an artist. He formed the Jimi Hendrix Experience with bassist Noel Redding and drummer Mitch Mitchell, and together they created a sound that was unlike anything that had been heard before. Their debut album, Are You Experienced?, released in 1967, was a critical and commercial success that introduced Jimi's revolutionary approach to the electric guitar to audiences around the world. If you're fascinated by the incredible story of Jimi Hendrix and want to learn more about the legends who shaped rock and roll history, please subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most compelling stories from music history, and we'd love to have you as part of our community. Jimi's approach to the guitar was fundamentally different from what had come before. He didn't just play notes. He manipulated them, bent them, distorted them, and transformed them into something entirely new. He used feedback, distortion, and various effects to create sounds that seemed to defy the conventional understanding of what an electric guitar could do. His performances were not just musical displays. They were theatrical events that captivated audiences and left them in awe of his abilities. By 1968 and 1969, Jimi Hendrix had become one of the most celebrated musicians in the world. He had performed at major festivals, released multiple successful albums, and had established himself as a true innovator in the world of rock music. His influence was already being felt across the industry, with countless musicians studying his techniques and trying to understand the secrets behind his revolutionary approach to the instrument. However, with this extraordinary success came a set of challenges and pressures that were equally extraordinary. Jimi was constantly in demand, constantly expected to deliver something new and groundbreaking. Record labels wanted more albums, promoters wanted more concerts, and fans wanted more of the magic that he seemed to create every time he picked up his guitar. The pressure was relentless, and it was beginning to take its toll on him in ways that were not immediately visible to the outside world. Beyond the professional pressures, Jimi was also dealing with personal struggles that were becoming increasingly difficult to manage. He was involved in a complicated romantic relationship with Kathy Etchingham, a woman he had met in London and with whom he had shared a deep connection. However, the demands of his career and his own internal struggles were putting tremendous strain on their relationship. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and periods of separation that left both of them emotionally exhausted. Jimi was also struggling with the weight of his own past. The loss of his mother, which had occurred so many years earlier, still haunted him. He had never fully processed that grief, and it manifested itself in various ways throughout his life. He was also dealing with a complicated relationship with his father, Hendrix, and there were unresolved issues between them that weighed heavily on his mind. Despite his father's pride in his son's accomplishments, there was a distance between them that neither of them seemed able to bridge. As Jimi Hendrix entered the summer of 1969, he found himself at a crossroads. On one hand, he had achieved everything that a musician could dream of achieving. He had fame, fortune, critical acclaim, and the respect of his peers. On the other hand, he was increasingly aware that the path he was on was unsustainable. The constant demands, the pressure to innovate, the weight of his own expectations, and the unresolved personal issues were all combining to create a situation that was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Jimi was a perfectionist in every sense of the word. In the studio, he would spend hours working on a single guitar riff, trying to capture exactly the right tone, the right feeling, the right emotional resonance. He would experiment with different effects, different amplifiers, different techniques, always searching for something that he hadn't heard before, something that would push the boundaries of what was possible with an electric guitar. This relentless pursuit of perfection was one of the things that made him such a great artist, but it was also exhausting, both mentally and physically. His personal life was becoming increasingly chaotic. Beyond his relationship with Kathy Etchingham, there were other romantic entanglements and complications that were adding to his stress. He was also dealing with the darker aspects of the music industry in the late 1960s. Drug use was rampant in the music scene, and while Jimi was not known to be a heavy drug user in the way that some of his contemporaries were, he did experiment with various substances. This added another layer of complexity to his already complicated life. Jimi was also dealing with some legal issues that were weighing on him. In May 1969, he had been arrested in Toronto on drug-related charges. Although he was eventually acquitted, the experience had been deeply unsettling. It was a reminder of how precarious his position was, how quickly things could change, and how vulnerable he was despite his fame and success. The legal battle had been emotionally draining, and it had taken his focus away from his music for a period of time. What do you think about the pressures that artists like Jimi Hendrix faced during this era? Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on how the music industry's demands affected these legendary musicians. We'd love to hear your perspective and engage with our community. In the weeks leading up to the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, Jimi was working on new material and preparing for what would become one of the most legendary performances of his career. He had been thinking about what he wanted to play at the festival, and he had an idea that was starting to take shape in his mind. He wanted to do something that would be remembered, something that would capture the spirit of the moment and the feelings of the generation that had gathered at the festival. The idea that was forming in his mind was bold and potentially controversial. He was thinking about performing a new arrangement of the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States. But this would not be a traditional rendition. Instead, he wanted to transform the anthem into something that reflected the turbulent times in which they were living. The Vietnam War was raging, and there was a deep divide in American society. Young people were questioning authority and demanding change. Jimi wanted his music to reflect this moment in history, to capture the pain and the hope that were swirling around the country. This idea was deeply personal to Jimi. He believed that music had the power to make political and social statements, that it could be a vehicle for expressing dissent and calling for change. He wanted to use his guitar to speak to the contradictions and the struggles that defined America in 1969. By transforming the national anthem, he could make a statement about what it meant to be American in this moment, about the hypocrisy and the pain that were embedded in the nation's history. As he prepared for Woodstock, Jimi was also reflecting on his own life and his own journey. He was thinking about where he had come from, about the struggles he had overcome, and about the extraordinary path that had brought him to this moment. He was thinking about his mother, about the loss that had shaped so much of who he was. He was thinking about his father, about the relationship that had never quite been what he wanted it to be. He was thinking about all of the people who had believed in him, who had supported him, and who had helped him get to where he was. But beneath all of these thoughts and reflections, there was a growing sense of unease. Jimi was beginning to feel the weight of everything that was happening in his life. The success, the pressure, the personal complications, the unresolved grief. It was all beginning to accumulate in a way that was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. He was sleeping less, eating less, and spending more time alone with his guitar, working on new ideas, and trying to find some kind of peace or resolution through his music. August 18th, 1969, was a day that would be forever etched in the history of rock and roll. It was the day that Jimi Hendrix would deliver one of the most iconic performances in the history of music. His rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner would become legendary, a moment that would be replayed and discussed for decades to come. But what many people do not know is that this performance came at a time when Jimi was dealing with some of the most difficult personal circumstances of his life. Just hours before he was scheduled to take the stage at Woodstock, Jimi received devastating news. The exact details of what he learned have been the subject of much speculation and debate over the years, but what is absolutely clear is that it was something that shook him to his core. Some accounts suggest that he received word about a serious illness or injury affecting someone close to him. Other accounts suggest that it was news related to his family situation, perhaps something involving his father or another family member. Whatever the specific nature of the news, it was something that struck at the very heart of who Jimi was as a person. The impact of this news was immediate and profound. Jimi, who was known for his ability to maintain his composure and his focus, found himself struggling to process what he had just learned. He was devastated, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to come crashing down on him. The pressures that had been building up over the previous months suddenly felt unbearable. The isolation, the loneliness, the constant demands, the unresolved family issues, the grief that he had been carrying since childhood, it all came together in a moment of overwhelming emotion. According to witnesses who were present at the festival and who were close to Jimi during this time, he was visibly shaken by the news. He withdrew from the people around him, seeking solitude to process what he had learned. Some accounts describe him as being in tears, struggling to come to terms with the news. The man who had seemed so invincible on stage, who had commanded the attention of thousands with his guitar playing, was suddenly vulnerable and human in a way that few people ever saw. For a moment, the mask of the confident rock star fell away, and what was revealed was a deeply sensitive and wounded human being. There are accounts from people who were with Jimi during this time that describe him falling to his knees, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. Whether this happened literally or figuratively, the image is powerful and symbolic. It represents a moment when the weight of everything became too much to bear, when the carefully constructed facade of the successful musician crumbled, and the pain that had been lurking beneath the surface finally broke through. This is one of the most powerful and emotional moments in music history. If you're moved by Jimi's story and want to support our channel as we continue to bring you these incredible stories, please like this video. Your support helps us reach more people and share these important narratives. But Jimi Hendrix was not a man who would allow his personal pain to prevent him from doing what he believed he was meant to do. He was a professional, and he was also an artist who understood the power of channeling emotion into his music. As the time approached for him to take the stage, he made a decision. He would perform. He would go out there and play his heart out, and he would transform his pain into something beautiful and meaningful. This was what he had always done. He had taken his struggles, his emotions, and his experiences, and he had poured them into his music. When Jimi finally took the stage at Woodstock, something extraordinary happened. The news he had received, whatever it was, seemed to fuel his performance in a way that was almost supernatural. His fingers moved across the fretboard with even more intensity and passion than usual. His rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner was not just a musical performance. It was a cathartic release, a pouring out of everything he was feeling in that moment. The distorted, wailing sounds that came from his guitar were like the cry of a wounded soul. The way he bent the notes, the way he manipulated the feedback and the effects, created a soundscape that was both beautiful and haunting. It was as if he was using the guitar to express something that words could never capture. The audience, which numbered in the hundreds of thousands, was transfixed. Many people in the crowd were moved to tears by the performance. They could sense that something profound was happening, that they were witnessing not just a great musical performance, but a moment of genuine human expression and vulnerability. What made this moment even more remarkable was that Jimi was performing while carrying the weight of whatever devastating news he had received. He was channeling his pain, his grief, and his emotion into his art. This is what separated Jimi from many other musicians: his ability to take his deepest feelings and transform them into something that could move and inspire others. He didn't hide from his pain. He embraced it and used it as fuel for his creativity. The performance lasted only about 3 minutes, but in those 3 minutes, Jimi Hendrix created something that would be remembered for generations. The recording of his Woodstock performance would become one of the most iconic moments in rock music history. It would be studied by musicians, analyzed by critics, and celebrated by fans around the world. But few people understood the full context of that performance, the personal struggle that Jimi was dealing with as he played. In the days and weeks following his legendary Woodstock performance, Jimi Hendrix found himself in a strange position. On one hand, he had just delivered what many consider to be the greatest guitar performance in the history of rock music. The response to his Woodstock performance was overwhelmingly positive, and it had cemented his status as one of the greatest musicians of his generation. On the other hand, the devastating news that he had received just hours before his performance continued to weigh heavily on him. Jimi tried to move forward with his life and his career. He continued to perform, continued to record, and continued to work on new material. But those who knew him well could see that something had changed. The news he had received that day in August 1969 had affected him deeply, and while he continued to push forward with his art, there was a different quality to his work. Some of his later recordings showed a more introspective and melancholic side of his artistry. The music became darker, more complex, and more emotionally raw. In the months following Woodstock, Jimi was also dealing with the aftermath of the news he had received. Whatever the specific nature of the devastating information was, it had consequences that continued to unfold over time. He was struggling to maintain his relationships, struggling to find peace in his personal life, and struggling to reconcile the extraordinary success he had achieved with the deep unhappiness that he felt in many areas of his life. Jimi's drug use, which had been occasional and experimental in the past, began to increase during this period. He was using drugs as a way to cope with the pain and the stress that he was experiencing. This was a dangerous path, and it was one that would ultimately contribute to his downfall. The drugs provided temporary relief from his emotional pain, but they also added to his problems and made his situation increasingly difficult to manage. Jimi's story is a powerful reminder of the human cost of fame and the importance of mental health and emotional support. If you found this story meaningful and want to see more content about music legends and their untold stories, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Your support means everything to us. During this period, Jimi was also dealing with increasing tensions in his professional life. His relationship with his manager and his record label was becoming strained. There were disagreements about the direction of his music, about the albums he wanted to record, and about the performances he wanted to give. Jimi wanted to continue to evolve as an artist, to explore new sounds and new directions. But there were people in the industry who wanted him to continue doing what had made him successful in the past. Jimi was also dealing with the pressures of being a black musician in an industry that was still deeply racist. While he had achieved tremendous success, he was still subject to discrimination and prejudice in various forms. There were venues that wouldn't book him, there were people in the industry who didn't take him seriously, and there were social situations in which he was made to feel unwelcome because of the color of his skin. This added another layer of complexity to his already complicated life. In his personal relationships, Jimi was struggling as well. His relationship with Kathy Etchingham had become increasingly difficult, and they were spending more and more time apart. He was also involved in other romantic entanglements that were adding to his stress and emotional turmoil. He was lonely, despite being surrounded by people. He was isolated, despite being one of the most famous musicians in the world. Jimi continued to perform and record throughout 1969 and into 1970. He appeared at various festivals and venues, and he continued to work on new material in the studio. But the spark that had characterized his earlier work seemed to be dimming. The relentless innovation and the fearless experimentation that had defined his approach to music were still present, but they were now tinged with a kind of desperation, as if he was searching for something that he couldn't quite find. Jimi Hendrix's life would be cut tragically short. On September 18, 1970, just over a year after his legendary Woodstock performance, Jimi Hendrix died at the age of 27. The official cause of death was asphyxiation, but the circumstances surrounding his death have been the subject of much debate and speculation over the years. What is clear is that Jimi was struggling with various personal demons, and the pressures of his life had taken a severe toll on him. The exact circumstances of his death remain somewhat mysterious. What is known is that he had spent the evening with a woman named Monica Damon, and that he had taken some sleeping pills. At some point during the night, he became ill, and he was taken to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. The official cause of death was asphyxiation, but there are questions about whether this was truly an accident or whether there were other factors involved. What is undeniable is that Jimi's death was a tragedy. He was only 27 years old, and he had so much more music to create, so much more to contribute to the world. His death marked the end of an era in rock music, and it left a void that has never been completely filled. The world lost one of its greatest artists, and the music world lost one of its most innovative and influential figures. The legacy that Jimi left behind, however, is immeasurable. He revolutionized the electric guitar and opened up new possibilities for what the instrument could do. He influenced countless musicians across multiple genres, and his impact on popular music is still felt today, more than 50 years after his death. His performances, particularly his Woodstock rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, remain iconic moments in music history. That performance is still studied by musicians, still analyzed by critics, and still celebrated by fans around the world. Jimi's music continues to inspire and move people. His albums are still listened to by millions of people, and his influence can be heard in the work of contemporary musicians across all genres. He is widely regarded as one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and his contributions to rock music are immeasurable. He showed that the electric guitar could be an instrument of profound artistic expression, that it could be used to make political and social statements, and that it could be a vehicle for exploring the deepest aspects of human emotion and experience. Jimi Hendrix's story is one of incredible talent, struggle, and the transformative power of music. If this story has moved you and you want to continue learning about the legends who shaped our culture, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and comment below with your thoughts about Jimi's legacy. Together, we can keep these important stories alive and ensure that the contributions of these great artists are never forgotten. What Jimi's story teaches us is that genius often comes with a price. The same sensitivity and depth of feeling that allowed him to create such profound and moving music also made him vulnerable to the pressures and challenges of life. He was a man who felt things deeply, who was affected by the world around him, and who poured everything he had into his art. This made him a great artist, but it also made him fragile in ways that the world didn't always understand or appreciate. The moment when Jimi fell to his knees upon receiving tragic news was a moment of profound human vulnerability. It was a reminder that even the greatest artists, even those who seem to have everything, are still human beings who struggle with pain, loss, and the weight of their own existence. But it was also a moment that demonstrated the power of art to transcend personal suffering and create something meaningful and beautiful. Despite his pain, despite his struggles, Jimi was able to go on stage and deliver a performance that would be remembered for generations. Jimi Hendrix's life was relatively short, but it was filled with extraordinary achievements and moments of genuine artistic brilliance. His music continues to inspire and move people around the world. His influence on music is immeasurable, and his legacy is secure as one of the greatest musicians who ever lived. The story of that day at Woodstock, when he received devastating news but still managed to deliver one of the most iconic performances in rock history, is a testament to his character, his dedication to his art, and his ability to transform pain into beauty. In remembering Jimi Hendrix, we are reminded of the importance of supporting artists and understanding the human beings behind the music. We are reminded that success and fame do not shield us from the challenges and sorrows of life. We are reminded of the importance of mental health and emotional support, and of the dangers of using substances as a way to cope with pain. And we are reminded of the transformative power of art, of how music can help us process our emotions, connect with others, and find meaning in our experiences. Jimi's story is ultimately a story about the human spirit, about resilience, creativity, and the power of art to transcend our individual struggles and speak to something universal in all of us. His music will continue to be heard and appreciated for generations to come, and his legacy will continue to inspire musicians and music lovers around the world. The tragic news that he received that day in August 1969 may have brought him to his knees, but it could not diminish the power of his art or the impact that he would have on the world of music. Jimi Hendrix remains, and will always remain, one of the greatest musicians who ever lived.